Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. You know we're counting down to the US presidential elections like everybody is. In the second of our special series, we're going to discuss unemployment. In the first one, we discussed housing. Well, unemployment is the biggest challenge facing the American economy. Has President Obama done enough? Or does Mitt Romney have a better plan to add more jobs to the U.S. economy? Well, joining me to talk about that is Gad Levanon. Gad is Director of Macroeconomic Research at the Conference Board, where he also leads the labor markets program. Well, Gad, thanks very much for joining me. First up, what did you make of the fact that this morning's debate or last night's debate was expected to be President Obama's comeback? What did you make of the debate, and did you think that he made a comeback?
Well, I think it was a very interesting debate, probably the most interesting so far, and I wish both of them luck.
All right, you're going to keep it short. Let me move on to my question then and get to the jobs data. I know earlier this month when the jobs data was released, we got a comment coming in from Jack Welch who said that he believed the data had been manipulated by the Obama camp, or at the very least, the data was outright incorrect. Did you expect the unemployment rate to drop all the way down to 7.8%? Do you suspect manipulation, or do you just think the data gathering process is not robust enough?
I was surprised, but I have no doubt in my mind that there is no manipulation going on. In fact, if you look at the average growth rate or the average changes in employment in the household survey, the survey that is used to produce the unemployment rate, employment was growing as fast as the employment in the payroll survey. So the fact that employment grew very rapidly in September was just a one month's blip, and it doesn't, I think, signal any major divergence between the two surveys. I think overall employment growth is disappointing, and the decline in the unemployment rate is more a result of the baby boomers retiring than any strong growth in employment.
Gad, many analysts will bear you out because they've been saying that while the headline numbers may point towards a recovery, the underlying data points to a weaker jobs number and a weaker job situation. So new part-time jobs have dominated the household survey in September. Goods producing jobs actually fell. The National Federation of Independent Businesses Index of Employment softened in September, as did Monster's Employment Index. So paint for me what you think is the accurate jobs picture, both in terms of the unemployment rate and in terms of the jobs being added on a monthly basis.
Okay. So the background of this, of the job growth, is the growth in economic activity in the United States. And we clearly seen a soft patch since the spring in economic activity that is now being reflected in employment. So if you look at the 6 months growth rate, for example, of employment, it is slowing down quite significantly. And I expect that it would continue to slow down in the fourth quarter. We have in the Conference Board the Employment Trends Index, which is an aggregation of what we think are the 8 best leading indicators of employment. And in the last 2 months, this index went down. So I certainly think that employment conditions in the United States are not good. And if anything, we will see even slower job growth in through the first half of 2013. Now again, with the unemployment rate, it is declining, but I think it is declining more because of the baby boomers retiring than it is because of strong employment growth.
All right, Gad, so what you're saying is that you're painting a far worse picture for the job situation than any one of us anticipated. You're saying the data currently doesn't fully reflect the grim situation on the ground, and that in fact the data over the next few months will now paint the true picture, that is that the unemployment rate is not going to continue to move down and the addition to jobs is not going to be spectacular.
Yeah, that is correct. I think through the first half of 2013, we will see a disappointing job market in the United States.
But Gad, I imagine this is the biggest voter concern, right, as we go into the elections. My question to you is this. Assess for me objectively the manifestos, if I may call it that, of the two candidates, and which one of those appeal to you the most when it comes to the job situation. So President Obama, in his current term, has done a few things. For instance, the Jobs Act. Is that something that you think will help improve the job situation over the years to come? And what do you make of Mitt Romney's proposals again to boost jobs in America?
Right. So I'll, the Conference Board is a non-partisan organization, and we try to stay out of evaluating presidential candidates. But I want to make the point that I don't think is being made enough, and that is that the identity of the president has much less impact on the number of jobs in the United States than most would think. There are many factors that are impacting employment. For example, the state of the global economy, oil prices. There are 50 state governments and many local governments that have a very important impact on economic activity in the United States. Even at the federal level, there is the Congress and the Federal Reserve that are equally important as the president. So I think it may be disappointing a little for some to hear, but I think that the identity of the president, it wouldn't matter so much to how many jobs are being added to the U.S. economy.
Gad, I'm not asking you to pick one candidate over the other. What I am looking for is maybe an objective assessment of the policies professed by both candidates to give us a sense of which of these policies will help mitigate the several challenges that you have just listed in your answer.
Right. Well, so I think in general, in terms of policies that the federal government can choose and that will have an impact on the number of jobs is, I think, the amount of government spending. So I think in the last 2 years, government spending in general has been winding down, especially at the state and local government, but also recently in the federal government. Now I think that definitely has an impact on the number of jobs also in the private sector, and we see in a recent very important report by the International Monetary Fund, they find that austerity or government spending and taxes have a very important impact on economic conditions, especially when monetary policy is almost ineffectual, as the situation is right now when federal funds rate are close to 0%. So I think that in the short run, policies that provide more stimulus to the economy would be more beneficial to the number of jobs in the United States. And in particular, I think a lot of educational jobs, that were eliminated in the states and local government because of necessary cuts that they had to make is a mistake. And if there is any a policy that would help bringing them back would benefit the U.S. economy, both in the short run and in the long run.
Again, Gad, I'm not trying to push you into a partisan corner, but if you're stressing on the need to enhance government spending, then it would be fair to assume that Republican policies, which are opposed to increasing government spending, are not the policies that, in your assessment, will help bring jobs back to the American economy. That said, I also want you to contrast your solution, that is more government spending, with the imminent crisis that is facing the U.S. economy, the fiscal deficit problem, or the fiscal cliff, as you guys call it out there.
Right. So I think the deficit is a problem, and in my opinion, it is more of a problem of healthcare cost and the rising healthcare cost over the long run than it is by a policy that will be enacted in the near future. I think the healthcare cost it's 90% of the story there. So I think what the government will decide to do in the next year or two will be just a drop in the bucket in terms of the impact on our long-term debt. And therefore I think that at the moment, and we don't see any indication at the moment that investors are concerned about default of the U.S. government. U.S. government bonds are at historical low interest rates, and at the moment I think there is a bigger need to add employment than to worry about long-term debt.
All right, so what you're saying, and everything of what you're saying seems to point towards President Obama's policies, but I won't again push you into picking one candidate over the other. One final question. You've painted a fairly dismal picture of the data that we should expect over the next few months. What impact is that going to have on the kind of GDP growth that we can expect out of the U.S. economy in the third and fourth quarter?
I think we already see the impact of the fiscal cliff, especially on the business sector. We see a decline in investment probably, and I think in the second half of 2012 we will see GDP growth as about 1.5%, which is, I think, very low. But I think that in the first half of 2013 we will see even slower GDP growth, because then the fiscal cliff. So you asked before about the fiscal cliff. I think we won't see a fiscal cliff of 5%, but I think some items of the fiscal cliff, especially the unemployment benefit extension and the payroll tax cut extension, they will they will not be extended. So we'll see a fiscal cliff of about 1 to 1.5%, which will mainly impact household incomes and, as a result, household consumption. So I think in the first half of 2013 we will see even a lower GDP growth by about 1%. So I think, as I said, employment on a background of such low GDP growth, we will see a very weak employment growth through the first half of 2013.
And this is irrespective, Gad, of who comes to power in White House, because nothing can be fixed over the course of the next few months at least.
Well, I think the identity of the president could have an impact on the magnitude of the fiscal cliff. I'm not sure, to be honest, exactly in what way, but you would think that the president will be an important player in those discussions. But I think the general, there will, I think, be part of the fiscal cliff will happen regardless of the president, and we will see a very low job growth and GDP growth in the first half of 2013 regardless of the president.
All right, Gad, let me thank you for a very informative conversation, though it hasn't been cheerful at all. That's Gad Levanon there off the conference board, painting a rather grim picture of the jobs data than you can expect over the course of the next few quarters in the U.S. With that, I wrap up this edition of Your World at 10. Thanks for watching. Keep it here. Up next is Markets Today.